Forced to work from home by your employer? Laid off or feeling depressed at home? Do you want to make money working from anywhere? We'll show you how to do it from your couch. It's time for another episode of the Work From Home Show. Coming to you from their homes in Austin, Texas and Tampa, Florida, here are your hosts, Adam and Naresh.
Hey, welcome to the Work From Home Show. Shout out to all our homies, homeboys, homegirls, home trans, all the work from homers out there. I'm Naresh Vissa. Today we have Nick Searcy on the show. He is best known for portraying Chief Deputy U.S. Marshal Art Mullen on FX's Justified. He also had a major role in the Tom Hanks produced miniseries From the Earth to the Moon as Deke Slayton. He is the director of GOSNELL, the trial of America's biggest serial killer, and he is the producer and star of the hit documentary Capital Punishment. He's also an author, including his latest book, Justify This, A Career Without Compromise. So Nick Searcy, thank you so much for joining us on the Work From Home Show.
Sure, thanks for having me.
Well, let's start with your new book. It's called Justify This, A Career Without Compromise. Tell us a little bit more about why you wrote it and what it's about.
Well, it releases on May 28th, and it's basically a book about how I got an acting career going. You know, being a little boy in North Carolina who didn't know any actors. I didn't have any actors in my family. And when I started out, it was before cell phones or YouTube or any of that stuff. And it's just sort of it's a book about how I did it, and it also has some political stuff in it. There's also chapters in there about capital punishment, about making capital punishment, and other things. But it's more or less a non-political book about my acting career.
And tell us a little bit more about your acting career. I did share your big hits that you were a part of. Are you still acting today? Are you in shows, movies? And just walk us through your career as a whole, from college kid to Hollywood and back.
Yeah, I'm still acting, believe it or not. I've got a couple of things coming out this year, a Netflix series called The Perfect Couple that stars Nicole Kidman. I'm in that. And then on August 30th, a movie called REAGAN is going to be released about Ronald Reagan, with Dennis Quaid playing Reagan.
That sounds amazing. Is that's going to be in the theaters?
Yeah, that's a theater film. And I'm also releasing a film myself on Friday of this week, a documentary that I made, a sequel to Capital Punishment called The War on Truth, which is about what they're doing to the January 6th defendants. But I just, as a little boy in North Carolina, I started acting when I was in the 5th grade. There was a local university. They needed a little boy for a play they were doing, and they cast me, and that was kind of it for me. I did that play, and I thought, this is really what I want to do. So I knew from then that I was going to try to be an actor. I wanted to be a film actor. I was in love with going to the movies every week and seeing people like Tommy Lee Jones and Gene Hackman on screen. Made me think, okay, obviously you don't have to be that good looking. Maybe I can make it. And so I just, after college, I went to college at University of North Carolina, did a lot of plays there, moved to New York after that in the 80s. I lived in New York City in the 80s and did a lot of way off Broadway, a lot of plays in New York, and moved back to North Carolina in '89 because my wife and I were expecting a child, and that's kind of where my movie career started. I got a little part in Days of Thunder, which led to a pretty big part in Fried Green Tomatoes. And that movie did so well that I was able to move to Los Angeles after that, and I haven't had another job since 1991. I've been a professional actor for that long, so I've been very fortunate.
Tell us a little bit about the challenges that are faced by conservative voices in the entertainment industry.
Well, there's definitely, especially since it actually started with Bush, and up until 2000, I didn't really notice that it was that partisan. And I think in my case, I I got my career started in North Carolina, where there were actors on both sides of this political divide, and we had reasonable conversations. And I didn't know that it was like a bad thing to be a conservative in Hollywood. I guess I was just naive. And so by the time I figured it out, it was too late and everybody knew. But I think since 2000, since the Bush-Kerry years, it really got bad. And Obama, of course, made it even worse. I mean, it's like after Obama was elected, if you didn't like Obama, you were a racist. So that's when things got really ugly. But I have been very fortunate. I don't know exactly why. I'm sure I've been left out of roles, because of politics here and there, but I've never been completely blacklisted. And what I try to tell people is I really think that it's overrated, that the hatred of conservatives in Hollywood in terms of employment. I don't think you have to be outspoken about it, but I don't think you have to completely hide it either. And the thing about bullies is if you don't stand up to them, they win. And so I think that as long as the Hollywood leftists think they can bully you into silence, they're going to do it. And I try to just speak my mind and let the chips fall where they may, and hopefully let that be an example to others that it is possible to continue to work if you're not a Democrat in Hollywood.
I just don't understand how this came to be. How did the Democrat Party take over Hollywood? I can't wrap my head around, what did they do? What was the strategy, and how are they able to convince these minds? Is it just good marketing, or is there something deeper at play?
There's something deeper at play. I mean, I think it goes to the long march through the institutions that the communists threatened back in the 50s. I think that is what has happened. They have taken over every institution in America, most importantly, the educational system. So a lot of these people that go through, an Ivy League school or something like that, they're completely indoctrinated into leftist politics. And that's been the case since the 50s or 60s, if not before that. And so what you have in Hollywood and in the theater are, the powers that be, especially now running Hollywood, are 30-something Ivy League graduates, and they are completely indoctrinated. They are completely leftist. And it's happened gradually over time. And I think the only way we can undo it is gradually over time. I mean, they have done a great job of infiltrating every aspect of American society and totally trying to run conservatives out of every field. To me, that's what the COVID vaccine stuff was about. If you don't take the vaccine, you're not going to be compliant in other ways. And we want to drum you out of the police force. We want to drum you out of the military. We want to drum you out of schools. I mean, this has been going on for a long time. And it takes a very independent mind to resist all that. And so I think you have a lot of groupthink in Hollywood. It's hard enough to get a job as it is in Hollywood. It's even harder if you don't accept the groupthink. So I think a lot of people just go along to get along.
I went to not an Ivy League school, but probably a school that's better than an Ivy League school. Your rival Duke have a degree from there.
I'm going to hang up this phone right now.
When I was there were a lot of conservatives, older conservatives, who called it the United Socialist Republic of Durham. I didn't really see it that way. You have some liberals, and my brother went to an Ivy League school too. There's always going to be like a 60-40 split. I find it hard to believe that Hollywood or some of these other corporations are being run by 30-something, 40-something folks who went to really good schools and they're indoctrinated. I haven't seen it in my career. I just feel like there's a fringe minority who has a very loud voice at these corporations. You would know better than me with regard to Hollywood because I have almost zero connection there. But I feel like it's a fringe minority because even working at big companies and knowing people who work at large corporations, they tell me all the time that people are silently telling each other, oh, I'm voting for Trump, or I don't agree with BLM, or with
Listen
this.
to what you just said, though. They're silently telling each other. It's always a vocal minority. Every totalitarian society in the world has never been established by a majority of the people voting for it. It's always been a small minority that has taken power and then silenced everybody else, scared everybody else. If you do this, you're not going to work again. So that's not untypical. You know, there aren't a majority of communists in this country. There aren't a majority of socialists, but they are organized and dedicated, and they take power whenever they can, and they are ruthless when they get it. And that's how it works. That's how it lines up.
Well, we see these protests that are happening on college campuses right now. No matter what major city you live in, there was probably at least one school that had these protests. And I'll tell you, these protests, the media made it seem, I'm sure the ones at Columbia, for example, where those looked big and almost scary for the Jews there. But like here in Tampa, there was a story that went national about the local school, University of South Florida. And the protest was so small, it only lasted a few minutes because the police came in and threw tear gas. And that was the end. At University of Florida, same thing. Florida State, same thing. Police came in, tear gas, end of protest. That's what I mean by fringe minority, because I'm seeing videos, I'm hearing from family members who are graduating. Most of these kids just want to graduate and move on with life. They don't want their commencement disrupted by 30 or 40 people who are carrying around a Queers for Palestine flag. Like, they don't want roads. Where I live in Florida, the main road, I-4, was blocked off yesterday by a bunch of protesters. And there were Arabic Muslim people who came out of their cars saying, you're not helping our cause by shutting down traffic. Like, we don't want your support. We don't want you to be doing this. All you're doing is hurting our cause. My point with all this is you're right in that it is a fringe minority who has a very loud voice, but you and I, we're on the same political side. And I feel like a lot of Democrats are so fed up with this fringe minority, whether it's a part of the protests or BLM riots or LGBTQ, gender ideology, throwing it on kids. They're just so fed up that they're going to sit out this election.
Yeah. Well, the problem is that it's too late. It's too late that they're fed up, because most of these protests, they're not even sincere protests. They're paid protesters. These are the same people. They're well financed. These are the same people that did the BLM protests. These are the same people going all the way back to Occupy Wall Street. These are well-financed fake protesters whose sole purpose is to destroy American society. I mean, that's what they want to do. They want to ruin the fabric of society. They want to make it, they want to block highways. They want to block graduations. They want to just sort of disrupt everything good about America because they want it destroyed. And this is well financed, and it's phony. It's just like what happened in Washington on January 6th. A lot of that is totally phony. A lot of those people were fake protesters dressed as Trump supporters. Some of them were government operatives. And the media, like you said, the media trumpets these protests as if they're huge and they're ongoing and everybody's participating, because the media is in on that too. So the narrative that they want to push is that America is falling apart and we need to get rid of this outdated constitution because we can't function this way, and we need to centralize power more so that we can have a more orderly society. That is what's going on.
Well, the protests you brought up, Occupy Wall Street, BLM, there was change that happened. It may not have been change for the better, but the people at least got something in return. So with Occupy Wall Street, I was working on Wall Street at the time. I was in that industry when it was happening. And I think one of the big programs that was implemented as a result of Occupy Wall Street was DEI, diversity, equity, and inclusion programs, because you had a bunch of people saying big banks are bad, Wall Street is bad, they caused this financial crisis, which I think there's some truth to it, but I don't think the people actually understood exactly what was going on and how banks operate and why banks are important. And why the undertaking of banks or starting a bank is probably one of the most capitalist things an entrepreneur can do. I don't think they understood all that. It was just people who wear suits on Wall Street are bad. They make a lot of money. They're bad people. And DEI, what Wall Street did as a result was they started promoting more. Even when I was before the Occupy Wall Street, diversity was a big thing for them. LGBTQ stuff was a big thing, but they weren't marketing it or promoting it. It was there, but they weren't shoving it in people's faces saying, oh, look at all these black people who we're hiring. We're such a great bank. And what Occupy Wall Street did was force the banks to start promoting and marketing that, which then led to more corporations saying, oh, we should follow suit and not just promote and market, but make an attempt to have quotas and fill quotas at the expense of meritocracy. And when we saw layoffs during the pandemic, mass layoffs during the pandemic, and now in the tech industry, which followed suit to Wall Street, there have been mass layoffs in the tech industry over the last 2 years. So many of the people who are getting cut are these people who were hired in the first place to fill quotas, who weren't qualified to begin with, who work for these DEI departments within companies. Those departments are now shut down because when the going gets tough and you need to cut costs, well, you cut what's not really helping the company.
Well, we're in agreement because that's what they Occupy Wall Street is part of the movement to destroy America. And part of the movement to destroy America is to fill every position with incompetent people based on something other than merit. So that proves my point. I mean, they are trying to make everything unreliable. They're trying to make, this whole thing about there are too many white airline pilots. I don't care what color the airline pilot is. I don't care. I want somebody who knows how to fly an airplane, And so that is part of the point, is like you put people in these positions so that your society does not work well and you bring it down. And that's what DEI is all about. And that's what all of these protests, going back to Occupy Wall Street, that's what they all want. That is the point of them, whether the protesters realize it or not.
When it comes to DEI, for those who are listening and don't agree with us, if you need a surgery, just tell the hospital or the medical group, I just want an LGBTQ surgeon to do my surgery, or just name anything, any ethnicity, anything, person to do your surgeon. Most surgeons are good, but many surgeons are not. There are white surgeons who aren't good. There are black surgeons who aren't good. There are Indian surgeons who aren't good. In fact, I'm Indian and we're less than 1% of the population, and there's about a 50% chance that your surgeon will be Indian. But that's besides the point. A surgery is a big deal, and you want to pick the best doctor regardless of race or color or gender ideology or sexuality. And I know this firsthand because I had a surgery where I had to be awake. There was no anesthesia to put me to sleep. And when you're awake, and I didn't pick my surgeon because it was partly my fault. I said, just give me anybody. While the surgery was happening, I had my phone in my hand and I'm looking up this doctor who happened to be a part of a protected minority group. And I looked up the doctor and I see all these news articles about him being sued, removing the wrong body part, and he's operating on me. And that's when it really hit me, this DEI stuff, where I said, this is not the type of society, like me, I'm looking this up, I understand, but how about that common man who did not do their research, who is brainwashed by the DEI? They're the ones who are going to end up getting screwed over even more.
Yeah. Yep, absolutely. I wanted to ask you about something that happened at Duke, by the way. Did you hear about the Seinfeld commencement speech?
Yeah.
The student
I saw the video.
Yeah.
Yeah. So Seinfeld, for those who don't know, again, it was, to me, that it was very small. Like it was a group of like 40 or 50 kids. And that's what I was referencing. Seinfeld gave a speech. He's Jewish, which if you're Duke, you have to expect that, like I said, United Socialist Republic of Durham, you have to expect, okay, a Jew is giving our commencement address. And we're in the middle of a 1 month time period in history where we have college students protesting against Jews, saying gas to Jews, death to Jews, from the river to the sea.
Unbelievable.
Intifada. So I mean, if I was an administrator, I certainly wouldn't have canceled Seinfeld, but it looks like they were prepared for it. It was very short. It was just like 1 minute worth of protesting, and they took their Palestine flag and all that, and then they ended up walking out. And you can hear the students saying, like, go away, like, we don't want you, like,
yeah,
we're just trying to graduate.
Yeah. And it's hard. It was horrible to watch, and the same thing, a similar thing happened on the North Carolina campus when some UNC frat boys sort of defended the flag and kind of shut the protest down.
Oh, that was amazing.
Yeah, so there you have it. That's the difference between North Carolina and Duke.
Yeah, so I sent that to my conservative classmates. I'm still close friends with many people I went to school with at Duke, and some of my conservative classmates. I sent that UNC video, and there was a fundraiser for them after to throw them a huge keg party, and so I sent it to them, and they said, I don't care if it's UNC, I'm donating to it. And I said, hey, if I was 10 years younger, I would fly in for this. But they raised more than like $600,000 for this keg party, only because they defended the flag. And if you watch a video, because I was watching the video and there was all this nonsense on the internet about, oh, these kids are future white supremacists. You watch a video, you'll see one Hispanic kid, 2 Indian kids, 1 Asian kid, 1 black kid. It's pretty representative of the country as a whole. It wasn't a bunch of white UNC frat boys, and it wasn't one fraternity either. It was apparently multiple kids from different fraternities who protected the flag. So that was great, and I donated money to that. I saw Bill Ackman, the big hedge fund guy, donated something like $10,000 for their party. Man, that party is going to be crazy.
Yeah. Well, my friend John Rich, who's a country singer, he offered to come and play at their party, and
nice.
So yeah, it's pretty interesting. You know, like you said, it is a small minority in most cases, but it's always a small minority. It's always a small minority, and when that small minority gets enough power, they are ruthless. I mean, there have been commencement speeches that have been completely shut down across America. In California,
Columbia shut down there. California, multiple places. It's not surprising. It's not surprising. You had a good quote. Of course, Democrats won't like this, but you said, quote, I've played serial killers, rapists, racists, Klansmen, sexual harassers, thieves. I mean, let's face it, I've played a lot of Democrats, end quote. So tell us a little bit more about that. Well, because I think Democrats will get very offended hearing that.
Well, I'd say that as a joke, but, you know, if you look back through history, you know, the Ku Klux Klan was definitely a Democrat side. The Civil War, the Democrat side were the ones that were pro-slavery. And, you know, I mean, I make that joke, but it is sort of, it's not so much Democrats, it is leftists, you know, that and I just say Democrats because it's funnier, but you know, it's just I have made my living mostly, for whatever reason, playing bad guys, and you know, it just I understand them.
Yes, that's funny. That's absolutely true. And for more factual context, Abraham Lincoln, who freed the slaves, was a Republican.
Yeah.
Grover Cleveland, who implemented Jim Crow laws, who put his buddies into the Supreme Court to uphold Jim Crow laws, was a Democrat. You also said, who are some of the other? Oh, the KKK was a Democrat-created organization to intimidate Republicans from going out and voting.
Right.
That's why the KKK was initially created. Woodrow Wilson was a Democrat, and he had ties to the KKK. That's why Princeton University canceled Woodrow Wilson. Again, he was a Democrat. So for those listening who are just saying, oh, you're just blindly making fun of Democrats, here's some actual factual context. So I want to go to Oh, yeah, I'll let you finish.
One more point. I mean, and they're still doing it. They've just switched to white supremacy now. Democrats always, throughout history, have always won elections by demonizing their opponents, by making, you don't want to be on the side of those black people or whatever back in the 50s and 60s. Now it's like, these are white supremacists, racists. You don't want to be on the side of those awful people. So this is how they do it. This is what they do. They demonize their opposition.
Well, I don't even think it's an against white people thing. That's a given. They're gonna say bad things about white people now. I think the people who they claim to stand up for, let's take they call it BIPOC now, BIPOC.
Right.
We take the issue of affirmative action, for example. They claim that they're standing up for protected minority classes, when in reality, they're actually hurting those protected minority classes, because what they're doing is reverse racializing. So reverse racism is racism. If you're going to give a certain race benefits, then another race is going to be at a disadvantage.
Right.
So no matter what you do, if you say, hey, I'm going to do affirmative action and help these races get into college or get a job, well, those are spots or jobs that you're taking away from other races. And it turns out they keep promoting saying, oh, we're taking away from white people, when in reality, actually, and this went to the Supreme Court straight out of UNC, Harvard, Yale, a bunch of California schools. Yeah. It's Asian Americans, whether it's Indian American or Chinese American type, we'll say Asian American. It's Asian Americans who are even larger minorities than, let's say, African Americans, Black Americans, Hispanic Americans. Because like I said, we're only about 2 to 3% total of the population. That's it. Right. And we are the ones being discriminated against at the expense of, hey, let's get in this guy because his great ancestor was a slave in Burkina Faso, Africa, or an indentured servant in Uganda. So they get an extra 20 points on their application because of their ancestor. Forget about SAT scores, forget about grades or meritocracy. So that actually is racism, because number one, you're discriminating against another race. They don't consider white to be a race, so that's racist. But then also discriminating against Asian Americans. Yeah. And number three is, how offensive is it if somebody came to me and said, hey, you know what, I'm just going to give you 20 points. And by the way, my kids do have ancestors who were indentured servants. They were duped to go to Africa, left their families in India. They thought they were going to some paradise land. They were taken on a ship, and they had to work on cotton plantations and buy their freedom. And so my kids can make that case. But how offensive would it be if someone comes to you or my kids and say, hey, I'm going to give you 20 points extra on this exam because I just don't think you're that smart. You need these 20 points to be a regular citizen in the United States. I find that incredibly offensive. And I know many protected minorities who find that offensive too. Like, I can make it by myself. I don't need, a handout.
Well, their policies are never designed to help anybody except increase their power. That's how the left rolls. So they'll use whatever race or whatever tribe they want to use. They pit one against the other, and they'll say to one side, these people are oppressing you. We're here to protect you from these people. And they don't care about anybody except their own power. That's how the left rolls.
Yep. We've got about 10 minutes left, so I want to talk about January 6th. Like I mentioned in the opening, you have a brand new documentary called Capital Punishment. It is all about January 6th. I want to tell you, I've been following January 6th very closely since the day it happened. I was very upset when it happened. As an American, I thought it was a very dark day in our history. I still do think it was a dark day in our history. I wish it did not happen. With that being said, though, like I just said, I've been following it, and I want to clear up some very important falsities about January 6th that the mainstream media is running with. And then I'm sure your documentary is going to go into these in details. But let me just quickly share some common misconceptions. Number one is, yes, there were federal agents in the crowd. There were federal agents in the crowd on January 6th. This is from the New York Times. The headline says, among those who marched into the Capitol on January 6th, FBI informants, and subheading, members of the far right Proud Boys texted FBI handlers during the assault. And then it goes on to talk about the article. Next, this is from Newsweek, headline, secret commandos would shoot to kill authority were at the Capitol. That's from Newsweek. Again, from Newsweek, ex-Capitol Police Chief thinks multiple federal agents were in the January 6th crowd. Again, from Newsweek, ex-Capitol Police Chief sounds alarmed that January 6th was a cover-up. Again, from Newsweek, this ex-Capitol Police officer and police chief is in the media a lot. I won't be surprised if he's in your documentary. But he has a theory that January 6th was a setup. Next, the New York Post. FBI says it lost count of how many paid informants were at the Capitol on January 6th. They later performed an audit to figure out the exact numbers, but they are not sharing those figures. That's from the New York Post. Fox News, top FBI official dodges when Ted Cruz asks if agents participated in January 6th riot. Senior FBI official Jill Sanborn said, I cannot answer that question. Again, I can keep going on and on and on. The bottom line, here's another good one from The Intercept. Marines charged in Capitol riot got highly sensitive spy jobs after January 6th. I wonder how that happens. And then an important one, a U.S. judge from, this source is the Washington Post. A U.S. judge acquits January 6th defendant who said he was waved in by the police. And then it goes on to list a bunch of other January 6th defendants who were waved in by the police. And you can find this footage on X and on Rumble. There's countless footage of people being waved in by federal agents or by Capitol Police. This is from MSNBC, so this is a leftist news outlet. Joe Scarborough lambasts Capitol Police. You open the doors for them. He used an expletive in there. You opened the doors for them, said Joe Scarborough about Capitol Police. And then Newsmax, Liz Cheney, January 6th committee hid Trump evidence. So what we do know is that there was entrapment, that people or Capitol Police were opening doors. There were federal agents there. The other issue, people say Capitol Police were not rolling out the red carpet. They did not. Again, go to X, go to Rumble. You can see the footage for yourself. Congressman Mike Johnson released something like 100 hours worth of footage, I want to say, that's available for the public to view. None of the mainstream news outlets outside of the Newsmax, maybe Fox here and there, will report on this. It's all literally at your fingertips. So tell me a little bit more about the truth about January. I just shared the truth, but tell me more about your documentary.
Well, the new documentary is called The War on Truth. Capital Punishment, the one you referenced, was released in November of 2021. And we're releasing The War on Truth this Friday at theworontruthmovie.com. And what you see in our movie is not only the ridiculous oppression, the way they're treating these January 6th defendants, breaking down doors, treating these grandmothers and mothers of five and fathers that are deacons in their church and never been arrested for anything before in their lives. They come at them with SWAT teams like they're serial killers. They humiliate them in front of their neighbors, and they do this on purpose. They do this to embarrass them and to send a message to everybody else. Don't ever protest us ever again, or this is going to happen to you. The reason I made these movies is that I was in Washington on January 6th. I was there that day, and when I got home that night, what they showed me on the news was nothing like what I saw there. I saw people peacefully protesting, singing, saying the Pledge of Allegiance, praying for the country. And the media showed none of that. If you just watch the news, like most Democrats, most people who are addicted to the mainstream media do, you would think that all that happened that day was a bunch of crazy MAGA hat wearing Trump supporters who tried to destroy the Capitol. That isn't what happened. And The War on Truth is a movie about how the media completely distorts that day for their own purposes. What happened that day was totally a setup. And the reason it was a setup, number one, the National Guard was not called in, which should have been done. They knew that 1.5 to 2 million people were going to converge on the Capitol to not only to protest what they believed was a stolen election, but to make sure that the process that was going on in the House and Senate went forward. That's the thing that most people never acknowledge, is that the protesters were there to challenge the vote, which was exactly what was happening in the House and Senate. It wouldn't be in the protesters' best interest to disrupt that proceeding. It was the Democrat side, the leftist side, that wanted that proceeding disrupted, because what happened after the breach of the Capitol? They declared a state of emergency. We can't have any more discussion. This is after Ted Cruz had gotten up and challenged the vote to send it back to the states. So they shut it down and said, we've just got to certify this election to stop these insane terrorists. Well, what you learn in The War on Truth, we have testimony from Tarek Johnson, the Capitol policeman there. He was there that day, and Tarek Johnson, on his own volition, cleared the House and Senate after the protesters were allowed to come into the Capitol building. He was radioing his superiors saying, we have to clear the chamber. If these people come into the chamber, we're going to have to open fire, and it's going to be a bloodbath. And he never got a response. And he did clear that chamber. And the reason he never got a response, in my opinion, and this is put forth in the documentary, is that the government wanted January 6th to be worse than it was. They wanted a real bloodbath. They wanted hundreds dead. They wanted something that they could then use to tar and feather Trump and his supporters as enemies of the people, enemies of democracy, all that stuff that they constantly say. That's what they wanted.
And here's my pushback, though, and I want to hear what you have to say about this. Trump was the head of the government. And the Republican, Ted Cruz, you brought up Ted Cruz's name.
That's so cute. That's very naive. Trump was the president that the government hated. He was not the head of the government. Every other aspect of the government was.
So you're saying even Republicans were against?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. There are factions of the Republican Party that can't stand it that an outsider was there, and they needed to get rid of him. And you see that still going on. There's still parts of the Republican Party that you can't trust.
Absolutely. But if Trump is the president, though, I get he has these opposing forces. I completely understand that. But couldn't he overrule Nancy Pelosi in the House and the mayor of Washington, D.C. and say, hey, no, we got to have police. I don't care if it's D.C. police or.
No, you don't understand the chain of command. The Capitol building, Nancy Pelosi has to be the one to bring in the National Guard. Trump can recommend it, but she has to be the one because she's in charge of the Capitol building. Marion Bowser, the mayor of D.C., she's the one that has to bringing in the National Guard because she has jurisdiction over the District of Columbia. Trump could not force them to bring in the National Guard.
But couldn't he have made a big deal about it before, saying, hey, they're not bringing in the National Guard. We're going to have 200,000 plus people at this big protest, and
they don't care if he made a big deal about it. These people don't care. They're shameless. They don't care if you don't like what they're doing. They're going to do it anyway.
I know they don't care, but it would have helped his cause, because at the end of it all, it made it seem like, hey, Trump was the one responsible for this happening.
They made it seem like it because that was the point. That was what their whole intention was, and probably Trump didn't see that coming. I mean, you don't really realize how sinister these people are until it happens to you. I mean,
Well, I'll tell you.
Wouldn't have thought, before I made this movie, I would not have thought I would have witnessed the federal government treating January 6th protesters the way they've been doing. They're continuing to arrest them.
Yeah.
Right now, they've arrested more people this year for January 6th than they did last year already. So you can't really imagine how evil these people are until it's too late. They are going to do what they're going to do no matter what you think about it.
And I think the strategy of using January 6th as a platform talking point is just such a, like, your average American, not you and me, your average American really does not give a shit about January 6th. They wake up every morning and they go to work and they take care of they're trying to take care of their families. They're trying to educate their kids. They got health. So I think for this to be the main talking point is just a terrible strategy, but that's a completely different discussion. Well, look, at the end of the day, we spent months and months seeing these BLM riots in 2020. And even before January 6th happened, I remember telling my wife and telling my friends, this just can't be good. Having 200,000 people pissed off in an open area like this with not that much police, like, this is not going to turn out well. It's just not.
Well, it was they deliberately drew those people in. They didn't provide security. There weren't even porta potties. They knew all these people were coming. I was there that day. I did not see any police presence during the day whatsoever. Not one. Not one. Yeah. They were all only at the Capitol.
Yep.
And the cameras, the media cameras, I didn't see any media people. They were all only at the Capitol. Why? Why were they all focused there? Because they knew what they were going to do. And you'll see in our movie, we have Ray Epps, which has been the subject of all this speculation about who he was and what he did. We show him when he breached, he was responsible, or right there at the first breach of the barricades when people came into near the Capitol. And he comes in with a group of people with a big Trump flag, and then a flare goes off on the other side of the crowd. And within 1 minute, 8 guys in military style come in and escort Ray Epps out of that crowd. They get him out of there. And then right after that, the Capitol Police began firing munitions into the middle of the crowd, intentionally to infuriate them. This was all deliberate. It was all a setup. I know it sounds crazy. It sounds like a conspiracy theory, but if you see it in The War on Truth, the way we present it, it won't seem so implausible anymore.
The website is thewarontruthmovie.com, thewarontruthmovie.com. Check it out. I can't wait to watch the movie. I'm looking forward to it. And the upcoming movie is called REAGAN, so that's going to be in theaters. Check it out later this summer, later this year. REAGAN, about Ronald Reagan. Nick Searcy also brought up a Netflix series that's going to be out with Nicole Kidman, so check that out. Nick, I know you got to run, so thanks so much for joining us on the Work From Home Show. To all our listeners, check us out at workfromhomeshow.com. Get on our mailing list. Follow us on social media. If you have any questions about this conversation or these topics, hello@workfromhomeshow.com. That's our email, hello@workfromhomeshow.com. Nick, Searcy, any final thoughts you want to share before signing off?
Well, it's been nice talking to you, even though you went to Duke. I mean, I don't generally talk to people who go to Duke, but I enjoyed it.
I think it's the best conversation I've ever had with a Tar Heel, so it's good. I'm going to reference this interview, too, because there's a lot of stuff. And like I said, I'm really looking forward to the movie, and I'm going to make some family members watch it as well. Thanks for putting that together. And until next week, keep on working from home.